Okay, great. Thank you all so much. I'm going to do our official introduction now, and then we can start the readings. I'm really excited for this reading. So, hello, welcome to the Fires of the West Learning and Native Plant Embroidery Zoom gathering hosted by the Metabolic Studio. Since the last presidential election, Lauren Bond and the Metabolic Studio have held a potluck, protest printmaking workshop, and community crafting space every Thursday to process collectively the various traumas of this time. With the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, we have shifted gears and created this Zoom space to educate ourselves on critical issues by reading and holding discussions while we craft. We spent the first 12 weeks of this Zoom gathering focused on texts about prison and police abolition. And this current series is dedicated to educating ourselves about fire suppression and how we can decolonize our understanding of fire moving forward to create a safer and more resilient West. Many of you here have already received embroidery kits in the mail. In this kit, you will have received a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant representing the food and medicine that Metabolic Studio is currently growing on 2 sites along the LA River, as well as up in Payahunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water, and in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. So we drew images of these plants that we're growing, transferred the images onto fabric, which we sent out to you. And we sent with that an embroidery hoop, needles and thread, and a self-addressed return envelope so that you can return these pieces back to us. And they'll be eventually formed into a hybrid object and exhibited. So if you have not yet received an embroidery kit, please put your name in the chat if you'd like to receive one. And our team member, Jen, will reach out to you. And tonight we're going to be reading Risk Reduction, the Art and Science of Prevention and Treatment, which is a chapter out of the book Land on Fire, The New Reality of Wildfire in the West, written by Gary Ferguson and published in 2017. So for anyone who would like to read with us tonight, the way we do this is we read kind of popcorn style, and whoever gets tired can pass it on to the next person. So Ryan and I will read tonight, and I know Joan is also happy to read tonight. And if anyone else is feeling like they would like to read with us, you can put your name in the chat or just unmute yourself and let us know. And if at any point during the reading you would like to hop on in, you can put your name in the chat then too. I think Ryan's gonna put the reading in the chat now. Great. Do you want to get started on it, Ryan?
Sure.
Or do you want me to start?
I can start.
Okay, great.
All right. I'll pass it to Maya, and then Maya can pass it to you, Joan, if that works. Risk reduction, the art and science of prevention and treatment. While the ecological consequences of wildfire are enormous, so too are the financial costs to society. Of course, there's the expense of fighting a major wildfire, the salaries of the fire crews and other emergency response teams, as well as enormous aircraft costs, including aviation fuel and fire retardant. But that's only the beginning. Here's a breakdown of the largest burns so far in Colorado history. The 138,000 acre Hayman fire, which started about 100 miles southwest of Denver in early summer 2002 and destroyed 133 homes. Loans and grants from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which cost $4.9 million, damaged the power lines, $880,000, private property loss, $38.7 million, and loss of national forest recreation dollars to local businesses, $382,000, Value of timber lost, $34 million. Water storage capacity losses, $37 million. And when was this written?
2017.
Yeah, so this was written in 2017, just for reference. The total cost then of just this one fire was near $116 million, and containment costs are going up. While as a nation, we are spending roughly $600 million annually in federal dollars to fight wildfires back in 1995, 20 years later, that cost had soared a whopping 500% to about $3 billion. State government expenditures for wildfire suppression have soared too, doubling between 1995 and 2015 to more than $1.5 billion. In 2015, in the state of Washington alone, the cost of dealing with some 1,500 wildfires rang up at more than $250 million. At the same time, extraordinary secondary costs often result from fire, including lost revenue for businesses, damages to infrastructure, and revegetation expenses. Following Colorado's Buffalo Creek fire in 1996, floods from an intense thunderstorm caused more than $2 million in damage to private property, plus another $20 million in damage to the Denver water supply system. In the first couple of years following Colorado's Waldo Canyon fire in 2012, the Forest Service spent more than $75 million just to help stabilize and recover some of the most severe burn areas. Despite the overwhelming fact of hundreds of millions of dollars being spent every year on fire suppression and recovery, research suggests that shuttling some of those funds toward prevention, either to help homeowners reduce fuel around their homes, or for land managers to thin or do controlled burns in forests with heavy fuel loads, would by far be a more efficient use of tax dollars. Notably, the Forest Service spends about 500 times more on putting out fires in the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI, than it does on preventing them in the first place. This brings us to the conundrum that because we pay for firefighting from the same operating funds that Congress appropriates for research at a wide variety of agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency, the Forest Service and the Smithsonian were rapidly losing the Nature's Conservancy Christopher Topic calls science capacity. Since 2001, largely due to budget cuts in the wake of fighting fires, the research and development wing of the Forest Service has lost a full third of its staff. Quote, there is much at stake with the loss of land management and science capacity, says Topic. He says, forest lands provide half of our nation's water and sequester about 13% of the total U.S. fossil fuel carbon emissions, but projections suggest that the forests will become the net carbon emitters later this century if steps are not taken to make them more resilient, end quote. Those steps will need to be driven by sound science, science that can lead to better fire behavior models, as well as to more effective treatment strategies. A hopeful development along these lines is the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, developed over the course of 4 years with the input of every aspect of government, local to federal. The strategy focuses on 3 critical goals. First, to improve the ability of firefighters to respond to such emergency. Second, to restore fire adaptive landscapes. In other words, undoing some of the damage caused by 80 years of aggressive fire suppression. And finally, to create fire adapted communities, towns or subdivisions in the WUI that will be far less prone to catastrophe from wildfire. These latter two goals alone, restoring fire-adapted landscapes and creating fire-adapted communities, would in the long run save billions of dollars that will otherwise end up going into suppression.
What then can be done to address the first of these three goals, improving firefighters' ability to respond to a rapidly growing slate of wildfire emergencies? Of course, part of the answer is to make sure that we have enough firefighters and that those men and women have the best training, equipment, and technology at their fingertips. But there are other less obvious steps we can take as well. For one, time and time again, it's been shown that among the most critical aspects of safe and effective wildfire response, and an area where mistakes continue to occur, is frequent effective communication between different members of the various responder organizations. In one of the most comprehensive research efforts to date, in 2010, Brandon Nowell and Toddy Steelman intensively studied communication exchanges during three significant wildfires in the WUI, the Bull Fire in California, the Tecolote Fire in New Mexico, and the Schultz Fire in Arizona. The key finding of their investigations is that communication was most effective among wildfire responders who knew one another. While emergency response protocols have been developed in military-style, hierarchical fashion with a clear chain of command structure, how well people actually share information from an avalanche of rapidly changing, even chaotic conditions depends on how familiar they are with different members of the larger team. As it turns out, effective communication was most problematic between responders who shared similar roles in different agencies but didn't know one another. This breakdown could, in some cases, have to do with trust being confident that your cohort is going to perform as well as you'd like. But more often, it seems to have to do with the fact that it's awfully easy to assume someone in your same job in another agency sees the world and solves problems pretty much like you do. The solution suggested by the authors seems simple, but in fact, it's quite profound. This fostering better communication among emergency wildfire responders, they conclude, may be no more complicated than providing opportunities for firefighters to spend time together, both professionally and socially, before incidents occur. Other communications issues are being addressed as well. For starters, individual fire districts are finally adopting so-called common communications plans, which assure that firefighters from different agencies are all plugged into common radio frequencies so that everyone has full access to what's going on at any given time. Beyond that, in states like Montana and Arizona, agencies like the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, DNRC, and the Arizona Department of Forestry are making efforts to improve communication in a way that allows fast help for local fire departments. Quote, fires that we don't get to quickly, says Incident Commander John Trapp, can blow up into major burns, end quote. Keep that in mind. The Montana DNRC, for example, now monitors all the fire frequencies in the state. If a call is made to 911 reporting that someone has spotted smoke, an alert that's usually passed along to the local rural fire department, DNRC calls the local team to see if they need anything, be it bulldozers or engines or hand crews or even strategic planners. Quote, for us to gain even a 1% increase in efficiency, says Trapp, could mean saving tens of thousands of acres from burning, as well as millions of dollars, end quote. Trapp says the idea is to get enough resources to a new fire as fast as possible. The cost of front-loading a wildfire with equipment and personnel in the first 24 hours, he explains, is minuscule compared to what will be spent if it takes 3 weeks to suppress it. What about the second goal, that of restoring fire-adapted landscapes? It's here that range, forestry, and ecological scientists around the world are working at a feverish pace. As we saw earlier, a staggering number of acres in the western forests have excess fuels thanks to 80 years of fire suppression. Not only is there downed timber, which in arid climates can take decades to decompose. But there are also crowded forests with high tree density, as well as an abundance of so-called ladder fuels that allow what would normally be ground fires to rise into the canopy. Finally, more open forests and rangelands are in many places being overwhelmed by invasive species such as cheatgrass, which alters normal fire patterns even more. Part of the effort to recreate fire-adapted landscapes and thus reduce the severity of wildfire means putting money into so-called forest treatments. One such treatment consists of thinning the woods, which essentially reduces the intensity of fires by reducing the number of trees, eliminating young, tightly spaced timber, which tends to be especially flammable. At the same time, thinning has the advantage of reducing competition for dwindling water resources. That, in turn, keeps the remaining trees healthier and thus more resistant to insects and disease, which in turn keeps them from turning into standing tinderboxes. What's more, by decreasing the size of the canopy, thinning ensures that more of the rainfall that falls will reach and soak into the ground. Joan, are you able to take it from there?
Yes. But research suggests that to have the desired effects, thinning has to be done on a fairly large scale, removing a significant number of trees across a large number of acres. At an estimated cost of $28 billion to treat all the places that currently need it, such efforts would break the bank. Instead, foresters will have to limit such efforts to high-risk areas where fuel meets structures. It's important to note that thinning isn't universally thought to be a good idea. Some researchers contend that because canopy reduction exposes the ground to sunlight, it not only increases evaporation, but also creates perfect growing conditions for grasses and forbs that in turn end up competing with the trees for water. Reducing the tree canopy by thinning can also cause the temperature in the forest to increase, the humidity level to decrease, and fuels on the ground to desiccate more quickly, all of which could lead to more severe burns. In addition, the roads needed to remove logs from a forest for commercial use can be both an entry point for weeds and a path for sediment runoff into local streams. Yet, even with all these cautions, at this point, the majority of scientists seem to agree that thinning, especially when followed up with prescribed burning to clean up ground plants and debris, can in some places be a useful tool for dealing proactively with wildfire. This brings us to the other treatment method, prescribed burns, where downed logs, small trees, and other flammable fuels are cleared away by means of controlled fires. Prescribed burns are arguably among the faster ways of getting forests back to a healthier, more natural state. But like thinning, to have much of an effect, prescribed burning has to be done on a large scale. When discussing the Yellowstone fires of 1988, one researcher suggested that reducing the severity of those fires to any considerable degree would have required prescription burning of about 50,000 acres a year for nearly a decade. So far, the public has been anything but enthused about that level of burning, in part because of the health consequences of so much smoke being released into the air. Indeed, in some states, Washington being perhaps the best example, public land commissions are reluctant to allow prescribed fires, even on national forest lands, citing vigorous public complaints about the resulting smoke. With that in mind, a cutting-edge modeling tool being developed at the Missoula Fire Sciences Laboratory will likely play a big role in helping managers decide the right time for prescribed burns. Quote, if you're planning a prescribed burn on the north side of Mount Hood, explains scientist Brett Butler, You have to be really concerned about the impact on communities in the Columbia Gorge, close quote. Butler says that currently the only prediction tools for assessing smoke transport and dispersion are based on weather service models, which offer only one data point for about every 4 square miles of land. But the model being developed by Butler, part of the tool he and his colleagues developed to help predict fire spread from wind, will operate on a much finer scale and will, they hope, quote, increase our ability to keep smoke from prescribed burns out of the population centers, close quote. Prescribed burns may in fact be an area of fire management where complex modeling is at its most useful, allowing managers to better understand the exact conditions under which a controlled fire can be set in a given forest. Related to this is the practice of managed burning, which involves letting a natural blaze started by lightning just go ahead and burn, again, with the goal of reducing fuel loads in the area. Of course, the decision to let a lightning-caused fire burn is hardly taken lightly. For starters, is the weather right? High enough humidity, low enough temperatures, and calm enough winds? Is the location right? Not only far enough away from homes and other structures, but also in terrain where fuel loads are either light enough or moist enough to not lead to major conflagrations. And what if something goes wrong? Are there features in the area, roads, creeks, rock ledges, meadows, that can check the burn if it starts to run? Once again, besides drawing on their own considerable experience, at this point, wildfire teams have painstakingly crafted incident response guides to help them make such decisions, not to mention having at their disposal a bevy of computer-based programs offering such things as topo maps, localized weather, and fire spread prediction models. The financial cost of prescription burns ranges from about $12 an acre for a 100-acre slice of relatively flat Douglas fir forest, well away from any homes, to 15 times that per acre cost for 200 acres of mixed conifers near developments. But such burns aren't without risk. As is so often the case when putting science to good use on the ground, there's a lot more to this than just lighting a fire. Can I pass it to someone else now?
Yeah, I'll take over. Thanks, Joan.
You're welcome.
Though it certainly doesn't happen often, sometimes prescription fires get out of hand, including an ill-fated prescribed fire in 2000 that was started in New Mexico's Bandelier National Monument and got away due high winds and drought conditions. The Cerro Grande fire incredibly ran up a tab of nearly $1 billion in firefighting costs and property damage. This was the fire mentioned in the previous chapter that moved into the watershed above the Los Alamos National Laboratory. 18,000 residents of the Los Alamos region had to be evacuated, and several hundred families lost their homes. Prescribed burns have also sometimes had the unintended consequence of opening the landscape to invasive species. For example, in the ponderosa pine forest of California's Kings Canyon National Park, fire managers began a series of prescribed burns meant to mimic the natural historic pattern of frequent low-intensity fires, but they made a mistake by lighting the burns too frequently. As a result, the canopy stayed open, which allowed sunlight to hit the forest floor at the same time. Not enough essential nutrient litter accumulated in between burns. The result was to create perfect conditions for a massive invasion of cheatgrass. In a number of other cases, managers planted pine seedlings, following prescribed burns, while at the same time using herbicides to kill native shrubs they thought would compete with the young trees. But the absent native pioneer species, this due to the herbicide, what came instead were thick mats of highly flammable invasive grasses. These later ignited and burned so hot in each case that the fire destroyed the entire seedling plantation. Finally, it's lately become apparent that doing prescribed burns out of season, say in late winter or early spring, with the intention of reducing the chance of unintended wildfire spread, can open up the land to massive alien plant invasions. The reason for this seems to be that such burns expose native seeds to moist heat as opposed to dry heat, which for many is deadly. For all these cautions, both prescribed and managed burning are critical tools for decreasing the risk of catastrophic wildfire in the decades to come. During the often terrifying fire season of 2015, for example, in the Okanagan Wenatchee National Forest of Washington, the North Star Fire, responsible for burning hundreds of square miles of national forest, was blasting right toward homes in the Annis Valley. In the end, what kept those homes from being lost was the fact that the Forest Service crews had earlier in the spring and fall seasons burned the, had earlier in the spring and fall seasons burned the intervening 850 acres of ponderosa pine forest to eliminate undergrowth, making a stand during the North Star Fire in this previously burned area. Firefighters were able to stop the fire's advance. Likewise, during California's Rim Fire in 2013, the fact that the Forest Service had done several prescribed burning projects near the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area slowed the fire's advance enough that I'm stumbling over words tonight. I'll restart that sentence. Likewise, during California's Rim Fire in 2013, the fact that the Fire Service had done several prescribed burning projects near the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area slowed the fire's advance enough in that area to allow firefighters to go out ahead of the burn and in the process save a number of homes from going up in smoke. Mastering the art and science of prescribed burns then means learning as we go, and now and then making mistakes along the way. Such wrong turns, rather than being a sign of carelessness, are a humble reminder that there's still much for us to learn about the ecological processes. The more committed we are to funding the prescribed burn projects, and also the more we support gathering data from such efforts, the more effective our efforts will turn out to be. But it's a big job ahead of us. And at this point, the amount of land that needs prescribed burning or thinning continues to grow with every passing year. In California alone, about 15 million acres were in need of treatment in 2016. The good news about the third goal of the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, creating fire adaptive communities, is that wildfire catastrophe in the wildland-urban interface can usually be prevented. Most often, the homes that burn down in wildfires do so from things like homeowners having landscaped with mulch up to the edges of the house, or having failed to clean leaves and pine needles from gutters, or having an unscreened attic vent, or an open trash or debris can get against an outside wall. Even unsealed pet doors can lead to catastrophic ignition. Groups like the National Fire Protection Association are working overtime to educate builders and homeowners in the WUI about how to reduce the risk of homes catching on fire. They preach the gospel of fire-resistant roofs, or of using stone siding along the bottom of a house instead of wood, or opting for non-wood paving stones in lieu of wooden decks. They're encouraging homeowners to place a simple metal cap across the gap between the underside of the roof and the horizontal trim board or fascia thus preventing the embers from being drawn into the roof structure. They talk of covering crawl space and attic vents with screens, of removing dried grasses and flammable shrubs from, like bitter brush, from around the perimeter, of pruning low-hanging limbs from evergreens, as otherwise the limbs provide a ladder for fires to climb from the ground up into the tops of trees.
In Colorado's devastating 2013 Black Forest fire near Colorado Springs, nearly 500 homes were lost. In one area of that community alone, 61 out of 67 homes, many built in the late 1920s, were destroyed, in large part because the woods had been allowed to grow more or less unchecked. And yet in nearby Cathedral Pines, where fire-oriented master planning and prevention had long been a priority, less than a handful of structures were lost. Because homeowners had taken precautions, placing rocks around their houses, keeping mulch away from the edges of buildings, making sure yards were free of trees and other flammable vegetation, the advancing flames were slowed. And then there's a page that's interrupting the reading with top 10 ways to protect your property from wildfire. And I'm just gonna read these out. So these 10 simple yet highly effective steps in no particular order can protect homes from wildfire. 1, maintain defensible space. In the critical area between 0 and 5 feet from your home by using non-combustible materials such as gravel, brick, or concrete. 2, maintain defensible space. Wait, wasn't that 1? 1, maintain defensible space. 2, maintain defensible space. Okay, well.
It's a different area they're talking about.
Oh, got it. Okay. 2, maintain defensible space in the area 5 to 30 feet from your home by removing dead vegetation, removing shrubs under trees, pruning branches that overhang the roof, and thinning areas. Thinning trees. Trailers, RVs, and storage sheds in this area should be moved or have defensible space around them. 3, reduce siding risks by using non-combustible siding or maintaining a 6-inch ground to siding clearance. 4, use a roof covering, fire-rated Class A, which offers the best protection for homes. 5, regularly clean debris from the roof, since debris can be ignited by wind-blown embers. 6, regularly remove debris from gutters for the same reason. Gutter covers, if used, should be non-combustible. 7, use non-combustible materials for fences and gates to reduce the risk of burning fencing catching your house on fire. 8, cover vents with a 1/8-inch mesh and box in open eaves to keep burning embers out of your attic. 9, protect your windows by using multi-pane tempered glass and close the windows when a wildfire threatens. 10, if you have a deck, use boards that comply with California requirements for new construction in wildfire-prone areas. Also remove combustibles from under the deck and maintain defensible space. Okay, continuing on. So that, along with the fact that a careful thinning of vegetation had kept fire on the ground instead of allowing it to reach the tops of trees, allowed firefighters the time they needed to save the homes. And there's more that can be done. Local and federal agencies would do well to invest money in helping owners achieve basic alterations on their homes or to provide things like pickup services for annual tree and brush trimmings. Though every summer municipal firefighters do incredibly impressive work, again, wildland firefighters themselves are rarely charged with structure protection, they'll never be able to stop every major burn from destroying homes and businesses. With that fact staring us in the face like never before, it's time to start living wisely with the inevitability of fire. Unfortunately, we've got a long way to go. In the devastating Yarnell Hill Fire of 2013, for example, only 13 of the more than 120 structures in the path of the burn had been properly protected by their owners. As of 2016, of some 70,000 communities that have been designated as being at high risk for wildfire damage by the National Fire Protection Association, only about 900, or slightly more than 3%, have taken steps to reduce the danger. As more and more people stream into the WUI, as fires increase in both number and intensity in the face of climate change, local governments are going to need to step up and enact land use planning precautions. Given that among the best predictors of property loss in the face of wildfire is whether homes are less than 30 feet apart, it's unconscionable that new housing developments in the WUI aren't being constructed according to National Fire Protection Association standards. Besides requiring new developments to meet these standards, local governments can prohibit flammable building materials like wood shingles, discourage overplanting in the so-called structure ignition zone, a space extending out 200 feet from the perimeter of a home, and develop community wildfire protection plans. When deciding on style, density, and location of new subdivisions, developers need to take into consideration things like water supply, how effectively people can get into and out of the subdivision, and the capabilities of the local fire department. Many rural housing areas in the West have been developed one home at a time, with lots later being split into smaller parcels. Over the years, this sort of piecemeal development has led to densities similar to that of suburban subdivisions, but without any of the protections planned subdivisions commonly offer. For example, water supplies may be limited and often woefully inadequate to fight wildfire, and the access into the area may be severely constrained by narrow, winding roads, sometimes with severely weight-limited bridges. With wildfire here to stay, land use regulations throughout the West should be updated to include fire-relevant building codes, and in extremely fire-prone areas, development should be seriously restricted, as we've learned from other natural disasters like floods and hurricanes. Making questionable landscapes safe for humans in the short term often has the unintended consequence of making devastating losses more likely sometime down the road. I'm going to pass to you, Joan.
Sure. The remarkable effects of human-caused climate change, along with overzealous suppression of wildfire, has left biologists, ecologists, and foresters scrambling to figure out what to do next. Is it wise to be proactive following big burns, even to the point of helping establish more drought-tolerant native plants than were there originally, thereby minimizing the risk of massive invasions of exotic, nutrition-poor weeds? Or could there be unintended consequences from kickstarting such transitions? Some of the most prickly debates on that question are arising around the management of federally protected wilderness. As some biologists predicted way back at the start of the 20th century, America's wildlands have given us an invaluable set of baselines for showing us what healthy natural systems look like. These baselines have already provided scientists with the knowledge they need to restore damaged landscapes, from reestablishing salmon fisheries in the Northwest to reclaiming toxic mine sites in California and the Rockies. At the same time, wilderness areas are teaching us about the fundamental needs of natural systems in the face of increasing drought, invasive species, wildfire intensity, and other climate change-related processes. Taking full advantage of those lessons, though, may require two things. First, given that some animal species won't survive in the face of the rapidly shifting habitats that climate change induces, we'll need to expand the size of some of our current wildland preserves. Connecting landscapes with north-south corridors to create better migration opportunities is among the most widely endorsed ecosystem management strategies in the United States today. Yet, even if that happens, and the political climate is far from friendly to such notions, many species won't be able to migrate quickly enough from their current habitats to more suitable ground. Unfortunately, unless wilderness managers assist in those migrations, moving or transplanting threatened species to more appropriate habitats, those species are going to become regionally extinct. And the second action item is where things get really sticky. While the current Wilderness Act allows great flexibility for providing for all sorts of special actions as long as the original intentions of the act are honored, it can certainly be argued that relocating species to areas where historically they never occurred is prohibited. In the coming years, the courts will hear a variety of challenges to the idea of wilderness managers being allowed to pursue such hands-on approaches to species preservation. On one hand, it's hard to fault those who object to what can be seen as meddling. As plant ecologist Frank Egler pointed out in the early 1980s, quote, ecosystems are not only more complex than we think, they're more complex than we can think, close quote. Time and again, we found out the hard way that just when we thought we were being helpful, as in the case of suppressing all wildfires, we were actually causing harm. With this in mind, even if the courts do grant increased power to wilderness managers to do things like assist species migration, it seems prudent to allow some preserves to continue under the more traditional hands-off policy. The challenge will be knowing what to do and where. When the Wilderness Act passed in 1964, it was to most people inconceivable to think that 50 years later, every landscape on Earth would be deeply impacted by the effects of human-caused climate change. If wilderness is to continue to be characterized by healthy watersheds and vigorous biodiversity, it's likely that some of its provisions will have to be interpreted in more liberal fashion. The wilderness system was fashioned both from the notions of non-human life having the simple right to exist and from the desire to pass along these natural wonders to future generations. If we're to honor those admirable impulses, we'll have little choice but to use every thoughtful, well-considered tool at our disposal. As for the millions of acres of forest and shrublands that lie outside the wilderness, there's much left to think about there as well. With warmer, drying temperatures entirely eliminating some plant species, which in turn results in loss of bird and mammal diversity, it's not yet clear what the best way is to intervene. Or is there even a best way? After all, preserving the current mix of species could be incredibly expensive. For example, the seedlings of some trees, especially valuable to the ecosystem, may have to be watered in order to survive. This is already happening in some places, including mountainous coastal areas of Spain, where following wildfires, seedlings are being kept watered with the use of special fog collectors. With the possible exceptions of trying to save iconic tree species, such as the sequoia, in most places will likely have to accept major shifts into new forest communities. But again, such transition will be shaped by fire. Clearly, we've still got a lot to figure out, but the incentives are high. Besides providing a critical habitat for a staggering array of wildlife, forests also filter and store water, allowing snow and rain to percolate into underground aquifers. The estimated value of the water filtration and storage services provided by the Earth's forests is more than $4 trillion a year. As a corollary, for every 10% reduction of forest land, the cost of treating drinking water grows by about 20%. Currently, about 2/3 of the US population depends on the water provided by forests. In fact, today some 85,000 communities in the United States, or about 180 million people, rely directly on forests to capture and store the drinking water they use. In addition, just the semi-arid woodlands of the United States, like those in southern Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, store carbon in amounts measured by the gigaton, which is the equivalent of 1 billion tons. Losing these forests would feed into yet another one of those self-reinforcing loops we face with climate change. Lost trees resulting in less carbon being stored, which means more warming and drought, which then kills still more trees, thus feeding future fire. End of chapter.
Thank you so much, Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
You're welcome.
So that concludes the reading portion of our evening. And we have transitioned now into deciding to break out into smaller breakout rooms to commence our discussions. And first, we're going to read our community discussion guidelines. And I will put these in the chat. Also, if there's anyone who would like to read these out loud for us, that would be super awesome. And if not, we can elect a metabolic team member to do so. Or Ryan can read. All right, let's have you read it, Ryan.
All right. 1, we agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise. 2, we agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruptions. Only one person speaks at a time. 3, we acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning on the content and discussion topics. 4, we agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or gender. We can't even if we wanted to. 5, we will hold each other's best interests at heart. We hope everyone has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best they can. Let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. 6, share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you have a tendency to dominate discussions, try taking a step back. If you tend to stay quiet, try challenging yourself to share ideas so others can learn from you. 7, silence is golden. Sometimes there will be long pauses. Sometimes silence can create space for folks who need that space to come forward. We agree not to fill silences out of discomfort. We will hold this silence with care and move forward intentionally. We welcome those of you whose minds are bursting with ideas to write them in the chat bar. 8, the facilitators are not experts. They are here to help facilitate the process. They and everyone in the group are here to learn. 9, 9, it's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well. 10, the facilitators are not moderators. They are not trained to moderate personal grievances. If discussion stops being about the reading and instead breaches into accusations and aggression, please respect the facilitator switching gears and refocusing on the text. If any of these guidelines are breached, a metabolic team member will reach out to you privately in the chat to provide you a reminder. If the guidelines continue to be breached, they will provide a verbal call-in. By staying in the Zoom call, you are agreeing to these community guidelines for our discussion period.
Thank you, Ryan. And these community guidelines are also in the chat. And I know that I'm so happy B made it. Hi, B. That was hard to get onto Zoom tonight. I know they've updated their security guidelines, and I think for better or for worse, it's now a challenge. Well, it's not for better that it's a challenge, but I guess in some ways it is for Zoom hackers and everything. But so what we're going to do now is we're going to split up into smaller breakout rooms, and we'll have, I think we're going to do 9 minutes together in the breakout rooms, and this will be a time to share and reflect on the readings. And you know, it can also be, these don't have to be like analytical discussions necessarily. This can totally be emotional, and this is a time to like really share as much or as little as you want. And Jen will provide some structural time guidelines and let us know how much time we have left. So you'll see that pop up in your screen. She'll be able to type to you in there, and then we'll all gather again.
Okay, I'll send everybody into the rooms now and see you all in 9 minutes.
Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
Yay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Thank you all for trying the breakout rooms with us. It seems like, are we all back now? Is this all of us?
No, we're not back yet. There's
Okay.
still people that are in the rooms, but it will close them out in 15 seconds and put them
Okay.
back in here.
That was super fun.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi. And we're back. So we haven't really done the breakout room experience much yet. And I'm curious, like, that can be a part of our discussion tonight. This is only our second time using them, but feel free, now that we're back in the main room, this can be a time to reflect on the reading, to share your takeaways, any thoughts, concerns, emotional perspectives, really just anything that came up for you. This is a great time to share, including how the breakout room felt and what you discussed in the breakout room.
We were all late.
B, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
It was B.
Hi. Our breakout room met, and we were all late getting into it and late getting on to hearing the reading, and we decided that high tech wasn't our friend.
But I would say that I do enjoy a lot the breakout room.
Yeah.
Even when I arrive late for the reading, I found that it's a really nice way to connect in a more intimate way to the community, and you know, to learn. And yeah, I love that section, actually.
Yeah, I know for folks who just hopped on, it's probably like a bit of an emotional whirlwind to immediately be in a room like, okay, what do we discuss now? So I know that's probably a challenge, but hopefully a good challenge too.
So you put us in that room because we were late, right?
No, that wasn't.
Like, were we being punished? No. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I'm so happy that you're here this week, because this reading, when I was reading it again this week preparing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, because it discussed the fire you were mentioning last week, and some
in New Mexico.
Yes, exactly. And so I highly recommend.
Well, I'm sorry. I was on the road today for 10 hours. I'm in Kansas. I thought I was in Kansas City time, but I'm just like an hour from Kansas City, and I had it wrong, the time wrong.
Don't worry at all. I just mean,
Robin, I think is trying to talk, and you're muted, Robin. If you.
Yeah, she muted me back.
What was the gist of it?
Are these all the people that came on to the call today?
No.
Where are the rest of them? Are they still in purgatory out there?
You have to swipe the screen to see everybody.
We actually lost a number of people as the evening went on. There were slowly people trickle out, as now we're in the discussion period. So we had a full reading.
Oh my gosh, an hour. You've been on an hour, right?
Yeah.
You're on an hour reading.
So, all right, I'm going to recenter back on to discussing the text. If anyone has any takeaways they want to share or perspectives or things that they learned.
I thought it was going to be about Native American perspectives on burning.
Yep. Yeah, so this reading in particular was kind of talking about a myriad of approaches of land management towards fire, landscapes that need fire, essentially. So this reading discussed thinning forests, using essentially logging practices to thin forests and then practice burning. There's also the strictly prescribed burning perspective. And then there was also a discussion about, what was the other? Oh, about increasing firefighter tactics and firefighter communication. So this reading, this whole series is a 12-week syllabus that focuses on the fires of the West, and absolutely is dedicated and focused on Native sovereignty and Native cultural burns. And we're kind of covering this topic from a myriad of perspectives to have a full understanding and grasp on it.
Yeah. Well, I've been attending the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection board meetings for about the last year. And those are Zoom meetings. And they're completely focused on burning, smashing, eliminating what they call, well, let me see if I can think of the technical term they use, fuels, and then they're designating all kinds of patches, huge patches of California as high fire danger zones. And, you know, they've just got armies of people out there smashing and picking up every log that falls to the forest floor that could turn into soil, or they're just like on a maniac thing to like eliminate fuels. The scope of burning, the pace of burning, they're all happy because they can hire tons of seasonal workers and send out people from the prisons to do this work. And it's just like there's not gonna, and they think they're gonna restore the forest by doing this. They don't even mention climate change. It's not the same old fire. It's not the same old amount of rain falling from the sky. It's the same old amount of moisture that's in the air. I don't know how they think these forests are regenerate. I mean, I just listen because I'm kind of concerned. I'm kind of curious about what the enemy has up their sleeve, basically. I mean, the chaparral is the biggest, it's the most extensive ecosystem in the state of California, the chaparral. And they just call that brush. I don't get it, you know? What's gonna, and if they take all that away, you know what grows? Just hundreds and hundreds of acres of dried up mustard plants and dry weeds. And if you think something, you want to see something burn fast, just drop a match in a grassland and watch it go.
Well, I just drove through about 7 hours of prairie today in Kansas. And I was wondering, I think that they used to burn the prairies too, didn't they? Maya, I want to hear what you said about the
Robin's muted again. But anyway.
the prescribed burn.
Did you
in
think I
New
had
Mexico.
why did it mute me again? Because I stopped talking or what?
Okay, I think that I'd really love it if we recenter and reread the community guidelines for
Okay.
discussion. I'm not sure if folks who have just arrived maybe didn't get the chance to read them, but the goal of these conversations is to share the space and discuss together about the readings that we had gone through. So it's in the chat. I can re-input it. But part of our Zoom etiquette is when you're not speaking, it's really helpful if you mute yourself because it creates feedback and it's hard to hear other people. So if you could keep yourself on mute when you're not discussing, that would be great. And another important thing is that we really focus on sharing the space as communicators. So allowing space for people who might need that space to take up to discuss the reading. So I'm gonna stop talking now, and I would really love to hear anyone else's perspectives on the reading and any things that they might have learned, and then we can discuss more from there.
I just want to first of all say thanks for doing this. This is really a pretty amazing thing that you guys put together here. And I'm in Philadelphia, so this is like, you know, I'm like way far out for you guys. But one of the things that I was struck by in the reading was the one quote, and I don't know who it was by because my memory is not that great, but it was that we really don't have any idea what impact anything is going to have because these ecosystems are so complex that we can't even understand how complex they are. And I think that was a really striking point because if you look at an ecosystem from a macro point of view, you know, you see the trees, you see the blah, 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 you know, but if you look at it under a microscope, you've got micro ecosystems that are going on in the same place. And one thing affects the other. And I thought that was a really important point in that reading.
That struck me too, Emily. I think it's just so complicated, and you know what was going on in my mind at that point was we so intervened, and it's just like playing constant catch up. So anyway, I have to go, everybody. So good night.
Good night, Roxanne.
Am I heard?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. I was just gonna reiterate something we talked about in our break room. It was focusing on the fog displacement used in Spain. We had brought that up, and it's an amazing effort, and it sounds like a really cool idea, but also I just kind of like had in mind what impact it would cause to where the fog was being displaced. You know, like say this fog is rolling in and it's targeted towards a certain amount of land and it's being taken to repair what's already been destroyed. It's honestly something to think about. And in the larger scheme too, of how science is kind of being used as both the weapon and the cure-all, like more so like, I mean, everything is science, but it's like, you know, it's a method, but we more so have to be in the land that we're trying to protect and spend more time with it, you know, like not just say that we're gonna like throw this bandage or, you know, fix one thing. So I don't know, like it's honestly, I'm kind of like, what's the word? I'm not immune to like the idea that, you know, like, oh, we're just gonna fall back and let science fix things, you know, like it's not just that. But really, what I didn't get a chance to introduce myself in the original room, and I just wanted to say that I would like anybody who is willing to work on a project to reintroduce native plants and also take care of those plants in coastal California, predominantly the Santa Monica Mountains. That's my family's land. That's like where I date back to multiple generations. And anybody, I mean, me and a few people are getting that together, and we would like to get that movement going. So, yeah. I'm Jay, by the way.
I just want to take this opportunity to introduce myself as well. I'm Isaac. Jay's my cousin, and he invited me to this event. I showed up a little late, but yeah, he pretty much sold the message. Like we're really working towards organizing some type of structure, or I guess organization, to really not just reintroduce plants, native plants to coastal California, but the majority of California, or anywhere where the fires were just phenomenally like devastated the lands. And yeah, if anybody has any resources or comments on that, that'd be interesting to hear about. Because we both understand that California's climate, and I'm sure you guys talked a lot about this already, but every region of California is different, and it's a real mission to find native plants for particular regions of the state.
That sounds great, what you guys are doing.
Thank
Do
you.
you know the California Native Plant Society?
No, I do not.
Well, it's an organization that has chapters all over the state in different regions, different geographical regions. And they do plant sales, and they have educational programs, and they do replanting projects and all kinds of projects and all kinds of learning things. So, and there is a Santa Monica Mountains chapter. There's this San Gabriel Mountains chapter, and
beautiful
on down. And that might be a good thing for you guys to connect with, because it is a lot of learning. You know, there's not one solution that fits all different regions. They're all different, and because of climate change and a lot of these other factors that people are talking about, like the controlled burns and the burns out of control or whatever, you know, all of that, all of our climate is kind of changing.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in what Jay said about using fog for something. I came in late on the call on the reading, so, but that might be a resource for you.
That's a great start. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, the thing is, it's like, it's a challenge to learn about this stuff, and there's all different points of view about it. You know, so that's something to, you know, to be aware of.
Of course.
That might have a point of view, and the forester, the fireman down the street might have a different point of view, and the scientist at San Diego State might have a different point of view. Okay, so just be aware of that.
We run into that.
Yeah, if I think if you become like attached to any one of those, too attached to any one of this opinions or science-based longitudinal studies and all this stuff that they talk about, you know, it's like you could sort of be over impressed with the scientists. Like you say, wait a minute, you know, I know somebody that had a house in the Sierra foothills for 10 or 12 years, and they used to have a Forest Service, like a place there with Forest Service guys and the firemen, and they had an office, and they gave out brochures, and they told you where to go, and they told you about the forest and the roads and stuff. And then they stopped having that, and you had to drive like 30 miles to find an office. So, and people up there said, now the Forest Service is abandoning us, which is really true. They're just like, they shrank their offices down so that the people who live up in the hills feel like they're abandoned, you know. So anyway, there's still people living out in the woods and up in the hills, lots of them.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I want to really reiterate that this space is dedicated to reading texts and discussing these texts and learning from the readings that we're working on. And I really value this space because we hold it with a deep amount of respect to communicate about what we're learning. So I just wanted to kind of hone that energy back in. And I'd love, it seems like Robin and y'all maybe should have a communication about this at another time and trade emails, so you can keep that conversation going. And I super think that this is important work, absolutely. I also really invite everyone to continue coming to these series because we're going to be learning so much together, and I've learned so much in this syllabus, and I really value all of your perspectives, but I also want to just dedicate this space to communicating about the texts that we're reading and welcome anyone who's coming in to respect that with us. So that being said, I am on the East Coast and it's 10. So we normally kind of keep these to an hour and a half. So I think we're going to spend 5 more minutes, kind of have a quick recap if anyone wants to share perspectives from the reading, thoughts from the reading, emotions that came up from the reading. And then
can you tell us a little bit about what the problems were getting onto Zoom tonight? Because that was like almost an hour process for me.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna refocus on the text for now, just because we only have 5 more minutes, and I would love.
Then I have to say goodbye because I wasn't here for the text because I spent the time trying to get on.
Okay, I also want to share that in our guidelines, it's really critical to note that we're learning from each other. So other people will have perspectives to share. It looks like she might be gone. So I'm having a real hard time tonight. I don't know if you all can pick up on that, but I'm really trying to create an energy for us all, and feeling a bit.
Maybe you can come up with some like questions, like review questions that kind of help keep us on topic if you want. Like,
yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, we with our last series we had community discussion community discussion questions. In this series we decided we would just leave it open, but I think maybe we will.
Yeah, maybe we'll get back into the question part of it, or at least have a few to go into. I just wanted to say, like, one of the main things that struck me from this reading, opposed to the other couple that we've done, is it seemed to be pretty heavy-handed on the financial cost of everything. And that is obviously very important to think about in some respects, except like that's kind of part of the reason why Maya chose this reading, is because a lot of the other readings that we are going to do aren't necessarily as heavy-handed on the financial, because that is kind of like settler colonialism-ish kind of way of thinking about it. Oh, this costs $4 billion because this property burned, this property burned, this property burned, instead of this is what's happening to the forest. So it just kind of, this isn't necessarily a critique of the reading, but it was just something that really struck out to me about this reading compared to the other ones that we're going to read and have read, is this kind of had its foot on the gas pedal of, this is how much a natural disaster costs. And it makes me wonder, like, who this book was written for and who the audience is. Because to me, that doesn't really resonate that much. And I mean, it resonates, but it's different than like science, you know, that's economics. But also obviously very important to look into. Just one of the main things that I found striking about the reading.
Yeah, I really value that perspective, and that again, this is the one reading that I thought, okay, we should look at this perspective here on the cost aspect. But yes, I wanna hone in that, yeah, absolutely, this series is entirely dedicated to focusing on Native sovereignty and land management and cultural burns, and learning about that perspective and how we can create a more resilient West. So I think I'm glad we read this, and I learned a lot from this reading.
Definitely.
You know, and it's important to have a well-rounded perspective of this, including the finances, because that is how this settler
That's how you're going
colonialist
to
system
convince people to do
functions.
stuff.
Yeah, and also even in that context, cultural burns and you know, using a mixture of thinning forests and burning, that seems to win out financially anyway, because without it you end up with billions of dollars of damage done by these mega burns that end up baking the soil and destroying everything. So yeah, it's a complex issue. All right, y'all, I'm spent. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Maya, thanks, Brian.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night.
We'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Jen. I got the package. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad you got it, especially
Yay.
before you traveled.
I know. I'm going to keep going on it tonight.
Oh, good. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
I got mine too. Thank you.
Oh, good. That makes me happy, because sometimes it's taken a while. Oh, that's beautiful. You got a lot done really fast. So I'm glad that you both received them. That makes me really happy.
We'll see you next week.
Take care. Be safe.
Bye, Jen.
Bye, B. See you later.
I'll contact you through the week.
I'll be looking for those texts.
I'll also be looking for a little card from Mr. Rob.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's exciting.
Okay.
See you later.
All right, baby. Bye-bye.
Bye.